season here at World Gospel Impact Church. Igama lami uNomfundo, the Dazzling One Xaba. Welcome to season 4. Well, we are accessible on our platforms, Facebook and YouTube, so please do watch on, like, share, and subscribe. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, man is blessed and given a simple instruction: be fruitful and multiply. NgesiZulu, zalanani nande. But were some excluded? Let's look at the case of Hannah, who was barren for many years, but eventually uNkulunkulu wavula isibeletho sakhe. And what about Sarah, who sought non-traditional ways that we've now come to term as surrogacy, to bring forth a child into her home? With the help of our guests today, we are talking God and science, assisted reproduction, and church. So ladies and gentlemen, do help me welcome our guests today. We have Pastor Kobozi. Thank you for joining us. We have Mnumzane Ukhoza. We also have Umfundisi Mukobong. So we will endeavor to leave no stone unturned as we unpack this topic. It would be easy if iBhayibheli silunderstanda ngendlela eyodwa sonke. But we know language is open to interpretation, and of course things exist in context. So we are mindful of that. But as I allow my panelists to give us their opening statements, my opening question is this: is there a separation between God and science? Let's start with you.
Yeah. Thank you for Gubala. Well, to just attend this question, I would say, they do, complement each other. It depends also, in terms of science, what are you talking about? Because I believe science is here. But mawuzo khuluma nge-science, mhlambe nge-aspect of theory of science. For example, you talk about Darwin theory. Then that's just an aspect of science which is theatrical, then which is not proven. Science always proves now. But when you talk about science as in experimenting things in the here and now, then I would say, it does, complement ilokuzana, a theology. It does complement God, because I believe with science, ipurpose yayo is to prove God.
Interesting. Thank you for an opportunity again. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here. For me, as a medical practitioner, I would say there's two ways to look into this. There's God versus science, and there's God and science. So it depends on which aspect you're actually looking at it, because we as doctors and nurses, we also pray to God to help us do certain procedures, do things a certain way. But if you're talking about, as Umfundis was saying, about evolution and stuff like that, that is science versus God. It's me as a Christian believing that the first person was Adam and Eve. And then you have someone else believing that we come from a form of evolution. We were once in a different form, and then we evolved to something else. Then that is science versus God. But if you talk about God and science, that actually do exist, but we'll elaborate later.
Good day. I think basically we are congruent with the panelists. I am persuaded that the relationship is generally, in the main, harmonious between science and religion, theology, and God. I actually think that if you look at the attributes of God, one of the attributes is the attribute of omniscience. So, which describes that science is contained in God, and I do believe there's a component of the whole volume of knowledge that is God-given for the benefit of mankind.
Interesting you'd bring that up, because there are some people that would definitely use the example of Jesus turning water into wine, and many other examples as him sort of practicing or in some way being in agreement with science. And then you look at man and this flair and creativity, and some would call it ingenuity to improve things and to create things. Where does that come from?
Yeah. I loved what the pastor just said. concerning God, His omniscience, His all-knowing. And the truth is, God gives us part of His knowledge, not all His knowledge. We have to understand that it has to be clear. We have to know our position between Him and us. He is omniscient, meaning He is all-knowing. He has all sorts of information. And what we know, it's limited to our capacities, limited to our senses. So what God gives us is just a portion of His knowledge. So, I believe some of the things that we see, even in the scriptures, God doing, it's God really like dazzling our little knowledge that we have, even the principles and the laws which we study. And you know what, I'm going to just desecrate these laws and show you, Guti, I am superior than, the principles and then the laws that you guys, follow, because we are systematic in our thinking, even when you go to school, sikufundisa systematically, and God would just show you, I'm not, I'm not found with chronos, with chronology, I will be found in the kairos. I can do things on my own because I am a God who has a will. Yeah. I'm saying.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely right. I just want to say that it's something that you cannot separate, basically, as I was saying. That just for a quick example that you mentioned earlier about all those women that you find in the First Testament who were not able to have children, and then we see God rewarding them for their faith, and then now in our modern age, we see a group of people who lacks faith, and then they quickly run to us as doctors, because they know of these options that are out there that, I can actually fall pregnant even without committing or being together with my husband. There's a lot of options now. There's in vitro fertilization. There's even sperm injection. There's a lot of things. But when do all of these things fit in together? Do you say now those who go for those options are against God? Or do you say God is using a specific doctor to trust someone else with their faith? Those are the things that one really we need to really explain to people that, at some point, because I can give Nomfundo the same medication. It works for him, it doesn't work for him. Why? He has faith, he has no faith. But it's all science.
Interesting you'd bring that up because infertility, we know, is a very sensitive topic. Couples many years ago didn't have options. When they were found to be infertile, the options were minimal. But with technology, with the growth in research, as you're saying, the possibilities are endless. But where does the church stand? Mfundisi Mukobong, maybe I should pose this question to you. Where does the church stand in relation to assisted reproduction?
I believe there's a long history of tensions and conflicts between the church and science, particularly emanating specifically around the period of enlightenment, where science protested to say, down with royalty, down with religion, up with reason. And that tension and animosity, which was not good, has actually polarized the ideological posturing of what we have in our introduction agreed that is harmonious, that is the relationship between theology and science. But the remnants and the aftertaste of that tension still lives with us, and it unfortunately doesn't just float at philosophical, ideological level. It influences practice. It influences how certain segments in the church do think. There are sections in the church that still are suspicious of science, and there is no one stance when it comes to the relationship between the two.
Sure. Mfundisi Mukobong, help us here. I mean, there's a couple, they're married, and they go and reference scriptures like, well, zalanani nande, and now there are ways that they can be assisted. What are some of the considerations before they seek those non-traditional methods of interventions? What should be the considerations, you think?
No, I think it's not as simple as we might just put it. The truth is, we have to understand that, and this we need to program believers to understand that every knowledge there is, whether science, whether philosophy, whatever stage of knowledge, it belongs to God. There is nothing that exists outside God. God is the source of all knowledge. So. There are instances where you pray, and God has a will, and His will needs to be respected. Sometimes you can pray, and God responds, praise God. But there are times where, God will not respond, where you'll have to depend on science. You have to understand, science is designed to assist us. There are aspects of, the evil nature of man, but I believe that, science is designed to really work at the advantage of man. It's not. That's why I'm saying sometimes believers can think out of, they can be so pious in their thinking, to such an extent that they, view these things as evil. But for me, if you really face a time where you don't have any choice, go for it. I mean, you should because that's still God's provision and providence for you.
In the time of Jesus, I mean, some of his miracles were considered to be taboo.
Yeah, exactly.
But he said himself in his departure that, truly I tell you, whoever believes in me shall do these works and even greater things. And perhaps science in itself and an expression can be considered as that. But then there's the topics of singles that sometimes make us uncomfortable as a church. Singles who vow, I will not get married, but I certainly want a child. And I think, Katsin, you mentioned this. They would go to these sperm banks, get the resources. What is your opinion on that?
That's a tricky one for me. Because some of these things for us is business, but anyway. The point is, if we're looking at it in a church perspective, God, when He looks into people, He looks at the family point of view. So you're not going to be talking about having children, having a family alone. As much as I'm going to be available as a doctor and say, there's a sperm donor, there's a sperm bank somewhere else. But God, when He looks at us as the church, looks at the family, the head, and the wife, and also the children. So that one in particular, it's a matter of faith. It's a matter of faith because also with science, as I said initially, when I was alluding earlier, it's about your faith in whatever that science is bringing up in your disposal. So you have to have faith in trusting God that He'll provide a man or a wife for you first before you can even continue with those things. Because things like assisted reproduction is for couples or families who are struggling with having kids. You see what you see. So those people, they're putting their faith in science now and God into that. That's why I said initially, there's God in science, and then there's God versus science. So if you're putting your faith and trusting God in a scientific way, there's no problem in that.
Then there's a thin line of ethics. 21 years ago, we were introduced to the very first designer babe, his name Adam Nash. Just a background, his birth was because the parents wanted to save the first sibling, and the gold mine of salvation would lie in the umbilical cord of Adam. So in those instances, in those cases of designer babies where now parents can actually decide on a gender of a child, decide on what biological characteristics they would want, advert. Where do we stand?
I can see answers in.
So we'll start here and then rotate.
As a panelist next to me has said, science provides good, excellent methodologies that help us, but they're not working as standalone entities, and they're coupled with elements of morality. So really, in looking at elements of error, I would say there's three I can propose. One is moment. I don't see the church being okay with teens wanting to opt for assisted reproduction. So what's the time? Is it good timing? Is it for you? So that's one. Number two is motive. What are the motives? So this is where you can use good science to do bad science. There is bad science, in many fields. So we cannot look at it separate from the motives, the reason why people are doing it. Basically, I don't think as a matter of gravity, it's about life, that you can just toy around with it and just do it willy-nilly for spurious reasons, I think very correctly it can be looked at in serious circumstances where couples are struggling and battling to have children, but otherwise it tends to border on playing God.
Yeah. Do come in also, Pastor Kobos, on the ethics of the matter.
I love what the pastors already said, but moreover, I believe that we as believers know and understand what we call the sovereignty of God. And we respect that and we honor that. Anything that undermines the sovereignty of God, I believe should be rejected. As he said, he spoke about bad science. There is good science and there is bad science. That science that tries to place God. No, we cannot, remove the space of God in our lives and in our decision making. So it's important to say, when we make decisions and give God, that place and understand that He is sovereign. He can, do whatever that He wants to do in our lives and not try and evade His will via, bad science.
Bypass the will. Of
Yeah, no, I would say, as we were saying, that science is there for our own good, but we must not interfere with God's plan or God's purpose in our lives. We may pray for a child, but now identifying what type of a child you want to have, what type of eyes and hair color, that's something else. And as a Christian, speaking on a Christian background, I think that should not stand in church. I'm not the one who can make rules, but my point of view is we must not interfere with God's plan. We must allow science to help us, but we must know when to stop and then allow God to take over.
And as a parting word, especially when it comes to balancing faith and scientific interventions, what would your closing statements be?
Faith is not contrary to reason. It's subservient. It serves reason. And faith flies above reason. As the pastor has already said, there's inherent limitations in the knowledge, in the natural knowledge that we have, but that exists in the space, in the bigger space where God is in control and all-knowing. So, again, let me reiterate that the two are not conflicting, but they're complementary.
Sure. Certainly a lot to think about. Please do continue the conversation in our comments section. Let us know what your thoughts are. I'd like to thank our guests. Mfundisi Gobos, thank you so much. Also, Dr. Lukwaza Sabonga Kakhulu. We also have Mfundisi Mokobong. Thank you so much for joining us, for the insight. And for you at home, I trust I'll be reading a lot more of your comments. Remember, if you missed a single episode of one of our talk shows, you can rewatch, catch up on our social media platforms. That is World Gospel Impact Church on YouTube and also Facebook. Remember to also like, share, and subscribe. Kamalami Nomfundo, the Dazzling One Xaba. Goodbye.